Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we have a really critical mission for you. We're going to master the muscular system. And this is all specifically tailored for anyone revising for IGCSE PE. We know you need the knowledge fast, but more than that, you need it to actually stick.
Exactly. And that's why our approach today is what we call the direct method. For these core concepts, you won't just get a dry definition. We'll pair it with a concrete example you can actually visualize and, most importantly, a high-value exam tip.
That little nugget of insight.
That's the one. The one that helps you get every single mark that's on the table.
Okay, so we've basically organized this session like you're building a performance engine. We'll start with the structure, so the anatomy and the connectors.
Right.
Then we'll look at the mechanics, how muscles work together in these coordinated teams.
Then the fuel dynamics. So the three critical types of contraction.
And finally, we get to the really specialized components. The difference between, say, a sprinter's engine and a marathon runner's engine.
It's the essential toolkit. So let's jump straight in with the groundwork, starting with what connects your engine, the muscle, to the chassis, which is the bone.
Okay, let's unpack this foundational concept, because I think this is a real source of confusion for a lot of people. We're talking about tendons. What are they structurally?
Okay, so think of them like a high-tensile wire. A tendon is this really tough, flexible, fibrous tissue that's basically an anchor. Its job is crystal clear. It attaches muscle to bone.
So the muscle makes the force.
And the tendon transmits that force so the bone can actually move. It's that crucial link in the chain.
And right there, that's the immediate exam tip, isn't it? The one that catches everyone out. Distinguishing a tendon from a ligament. Why is that so critical for marks?
Because their functions are completely different, even if they sort of look similar. You absolutely have to remember this. Tendons connect muscle to bone. You can think MB.
Got it.
And ligaments connect bone to bone, BB. So if a question is about stabilizing a joint, like the knee, you're talking about ligaments.
Right.
But if the question involves movement or transmitting the force from a contraction, it has to be a tendon. Do not get those two confused.
Perfect. So with the anchor set, let's do a quick tour of the key movers you need to know, focusing on their main action. Up in the upper body, you've got that big shoulder mover, the deltoid.
Yep, and that's responsible for abduction.
Which is lifting your arm out and away from the body.
Right. And its opposite action is often handled by the pectorals, your chest muscles, and the latissimus dorsi.
Your lats.
Your lats, exactly. The pectorals adduct and flex the arm. So think of any kind of pushing action.
Okay.
And the lats, those massive muscles in the sides of your back, they're crucial for adduction and extension. A really powerful pulling action like doing a chin-up or starting a lawnmower.
And speaking of those crucial pulling muscles, the lats often trip people up, don't they? Both in spelling and just remembering where they are. What other muscles should students really pay close attention to?
The tricky ones are usually the ones that are kind of tucked away. So down in the lower leg, the gastrocnemius. That's your main calf muscle. It's vital.
So gastrocnemius. Okay.
And its main action is plantar flexion of the ankle. Now that's the movement you use to point your toes, or, more practically, when you jump or stand on your tiptoes.
And then right on the front of the shin, kind of opposite the gastrocnemius, you've got the tibialis anterior, and that does the opposite thing, right? Dorsiflexion.
Exactly. Lifting the toes up towards the shins. It's critical for clearing your foot when you're running so you don't trip.
Of course.
And the rest of that lower body team, you just have to memorize them. The quadriceps on the front of the thigh, they extend the knee, and the hamstring group at the back, they flex the knee.
And then you've got the core holding it all together.
Right. The abdominals and the massive gluteals, which are responsible for extending the hip. Knowing that basic map and those key actions is really the first step to understanding any kind of movement.
Which brings us really nicely to the mechanics of that movement. So now that we know what these muscles are, the next question is how do they work together to create these complex actions?
Well, the principle is, I think, beautifully simple, but it's non-negotiable. Muscles can only PU. They never, ever push.
Never push.
Never. So to reverse a movement, or even just to perform it smoothly, they have to work in these coordinated teams across a joint.
And that coordinated team is called an antagonistic pair. Can you break down the two roles in that partnership for us?
Sure. So in any given movement, you have the agonist. It's also called a prime mover. This is the muscle that contracts. It shortens, it generates the force, it creates the movement you want. It's the worker.
Okay, the agonist is the worker.
The second partner is the antagonist. And this muscle must relax and lengthen to allow the agonist to do its job. It's essentially just yielding to the movement.
Okay, let's visualize this. The classic example is always the bicep curl. So if you're lifting a weight up towards your shoulder, that elbow flexion, the biceps are the agonist. They're shortening, contracting, pulling that forearm up.
Okay, now here's where the deeper understanding comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If the biceps are the agonist, the triceps, the muscle on the back of the arm, must be the antagonist, right? It's relaxing.
Right.
But what if I told you to lower that weight back down, slowly and with control? What are the triceps doing in that moment as the arm is straightening?
Okay, so that's the flip, the roles reverse. The triceps are now contracting to control the movement, so they become the new agonists.
Exactly. The pair works in opposition, constantly swapping roles as agonist and antagonist to create smooth, controlled movement. And it's not just the elbow. This dynamic is what drives everything at the knee, the hip, and the ankle joints.
That transition takes us perfectly into part 3. And I think this is probably one of the highest value topics for the exam because it deals directly with the nature of the force that's being generated. We need to talk about the 3 types of contraction.
This section is absolutely key because it forces you to think beyond just movement equals contraction. And it raises a really important question. How can a muscle create force without changing its length at all?
Let's start with the dynamic types, where movement does happen. We group these under the term isotonic contraction. So the muscle length is changing as it contracts, and that causes motion.
And we break isotonic down into 2 crucial subtypes. The first is concentric. This is the easiest one to get your head around. This is when the muscle shortens as it generates force.
Like the up phase of that bicep curl.
Exactly, or the up phase of a push-up, or the moment you kick a football. The muscle is shortening rapidly to create power against some kind of resistance.
Okay, so then you have eccentric contraction, which is the slightly more, I guess, counterintuitive partner to that.
It is a bit. The muscle is still contracting, is still under tension, but it's actually lengthening at the same time. This happens when you're resisting a force, and that force is usually gravity.
So like the controlled down phase of a squat, or lowering a heavy box slowly instead of just dropping it.
Perfect examples. And here's the crucial insight that takes this beyond just a definition. Eccentric contraction is critical for controlling speed and preventing injury. When you're running, your hamstring is rapidly lengthening to decelerate your leg before your foot strikes the ground. That is all eccentric work.
Oh, okay.
It's also the phase that's most responsible for delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. That stiffness you feel a day or 2 after a really tough workout.
Right. So if concentric is about accelerating against gravity, eccentric is mainly about decelerating or controlling a weight with gravity. That's a really useful way to remember it.
It absolutely is. Now that brings us to the final contraction type. Isometric contraction. This is all about static force. Here, the muscle contracts. It generates high tension, but there's absolutely no change in muscle length, and so no movement at the joint.
Wait, okay, if the muscle isn't moving, are we sure it's actually contracting? Isn't it just
Look,
tense?
That is a great question, and it's one that often trips students up. Yes, it is definitely contracting, the muscle fibers are firing, the cross bridges are engaging, but the external resistance, say, the wall you're pushing against, or your own body weight in a plank, is exactly equal to the force the muscle is creating. So the force is there, but the length just remains static.
So the perfect examples are things like holding a challenging yoga pose or a plank for core stabilization.
Or pushing against an immovable wall. This contraction type is so important for maintaining posture and for stabilization during other dynamic movements. You couldn't perform any dynamic movement cleanly without those isometric contractions in your core and stabilizers.
That's fascinating. Okay, now we move into the final part of our deep dive, the specialized components. We're talking about muscle fiber types. And this is where it gets really interesting because the mix of fibers you have kind of dictates whether you're built for explosive power or for the long haul.
We're dealing with 2 main poles here. Slow twitch, which is type 1, and fast twitch, which is type 2. And everyone has a blend of both. But that genetic ratio really does set the stage for your athletic potential. The sprinter versus the marathoner analogy is very, very real.
Okay, so let's start with the long haul drivers.
Yeah.
Slow twitch, type I fibers. If these are the endurance engine, what are their sort of operational stats?
They're built for efficiency and stamina. The force they create per contraction is pretty low.
Okay.
But their fatigue tolerance is incredibly high. They're hugely resistant to getting tired. And the key here is their energy supply. It is purely aerobic. That means they use oxygen, and they have these dense networks of capillaries and mitochondria to keep working for hours.
So type I fibers are like the diesel engine. They're reliable, super efficient, and they can just run all day.
Precisely. They're best suited for marathon running, long-distance swimming, Really, anything that requires sustained work over, say, 90 minutes. They are built to manage oxygen.
Got it. Now, for the other side of the coin, the fast-twitch type 2 fibers, the rocket fuel, these are the fibers you rely on for that explosive power.
That's right. Their force created is exceptionally high.
But the trade-off?
Their fatigue tolerance is critically low. They burn out very, very quickly.
And that quick burnout is directly linked to their energy supply, I'm guessing.
100%. It's anaerobic. It does not rely on oxygen. It uses immediate fuel stores like stored ATP and glycogen, which allows for that peak power generation right away. But those stores deplete extremely fast.
So they give you that massive power burst you need for a quick getaway. And naturally, they're best for things like a 100-meter sprint or jumping for a header in football or lifting a max weight.
The synthesis is clear. Type I fibers rely on a constant, steady supply of oxygen and fuel for sustained efficiency, whereas type 2 fibers just bypass the need for oxygen entirely to give you rapid, powerful, but very short-lived force. Understanding the trade-off between power and stamina is just fundamental to understanding training.
So what does this all mean? We have successfully navigated the 4 pillars of the muscular system for your revision using that direct method. Let's just reinforce those exam-critical takeaways one last time.
Okay, first, anatomy and connectors. Tendon equals muscle to bone, M to B. Do not ever confuse it with a ligament. That's B to B.
Second, teamwork. Muscles only pull. Movement requires the antagonistic pair. The agonist contracts, and the antagonist has to relax and yield.
Third, contraction dynamics. You have to know the 3 types. Isotonic, where movement happens split into concentric, which is shortening, and eccentric, lengthening under control. And isometric, that's static force, no change in length, crucial for stabilization.
And fourth, fiber types. The big difference between the long-haul aerobic type I low-force, high-fatigue tolerance and the powerful anaerobic type I high-force, low-fatigue tolerance.
And to leave you with a final thought to explore, let's just circle back to those type 2 fibers. We know they're built for speed and power. But if their fundamental job is quick, explosive, anaerobic work, why is it that heavy resistance training like weightlifting causes those type 2 fibers to increase in size through hypertrophy?
That's a good question.
Is that growth just about their power function? Or is there some kind of adaptation happening that we didn't discuss that allows them to get bigger even though their primary fuel source and their fatigue rate, well, they stay the same?
That is a great piece of critical thinking to apply to everything we've just learned about force, adaptation, and training. Go master this material.
We've given you the knowledge. Now go apply it.
See you next time for the next deep dive.